Hey guys, my name is Dice Rollin'. Today we're going to be having a look at a little-known made-for-TV Halloween movie. The Midnight Hour was written by William Blake and was directed by Jack Bender, who is the same guy who directed Child's Play 3, a number of Lost episodes, and, more recently, the Mr. Mercedes series. It was first aired on ABC on November 1st, 1985, and seemed to incur mixed reactions from viewers. Some thought it was a playful sort of horror movie for the season, and others thought it was just a waste. The Midnight Hour tells the story of a bunch of high school friends who decide to break into the town's museum for some costumes for a Halloween party. While there, they discover some mysterious artifacts that lead them to unwittingly summon all sorts of monsters and undead beings. So without further ado, this is my review of The Midnight Hour. Hold on guys, it seems I've popped in the wrong VHS. It looks to be a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Or maybe Halloween 3. Welcome to Pitchford Cove, or Pitchfork Cove, as of which I'm already nervous. In case you couldn't already tell, the residents of this picturesque town are preparing for the spookiest night of the year, Halloween. However, some are more into it than others. Who gets their teeth cleaned on Halloween? You're supposed to be shoveling pumpkin-shaped Reese's cups into your mouth throughout the day. Well, maybe you shouldn't be listening to me on that, as someone who's had saw traps stuck in their mouth for hours. This is Martin Grenville, played by the late Dick Van Patten, who is the town's dentist and father of Phil, played by Lee Montgomery. We then cut to a high school full of 30-somethings. Here we meet Melissa Cavender, played by Sherry Belafonte, and Mary Masterson, played by Michelle Pfeiffer's sister, Dee Dee Pfeiffer. As someone who is homeschooled, I just want to know one thing. Did people really fuck around this much in class, or is this just another thing I've been lied to about? Also in attendance of class today are Mitch Crandall, played by Peter DeLuise, and Vinnie Davis, played by LeVar Burton.
The lights are on, but nobody's home.
What are you doing here, Mr. Burton? Shouldn't you be reading books to some small children and claiming to fly as high as a butterfly? Or be on a spaceship or something? Actually, I'm glad you're here. This should make this more interesting. The substitute history teacher, Vicki Jensen, played by Cindy Morgan, finally arrives and it's time for some learning. But before that, Phil attempts to shoot his shot with Mary. To continue the metaphor, the ball hits the backboard and smacks him in the face. I'd recommend that he set his sights away from ditzy girls. We begin with a presentation of the history of Halloween and of Pitchford Cove by Phil. Now, I would take the time to correct him on some of his facts on Halloween, but we would be here for a while. He does provide some background on two noteworthy residents of centuries past: Nathaniel Grenville, Phil's ancestor, and Lucinda Cavender, Melissa's ancestor, who also happened to be a witch. Apparently, Lucinda performed a curse on Halloween centuries ago that unleashed all sorts of ghouls and goblins. Nathaniel managed to end the curse and hang Lucinda. With such a history, there is, of course, a museum all about it in town, with some authentic pieces and clothing. Phil's presentation gives Mitch an idea. Why don't they break into the museum after closing hours and take the clothes from the wax figures for Melissa's Halloween party? Flawless. Well, turns out it really wasn't hard at all for a bunch of people to get into the museum, even with a police-hired man and his dogs guarding the place. See, this is why curses happen. You hire a backwoods tobacco-spitting genius to protect something and I guarantee it'll go to hell. While the others are taking their perfect costumes, Vinny investigates the archive room. Side note, love LeVar's laugh. The group decides that not only will they borrow some costumes, they'll also take some decor pieces for the party. So they use an ancient trunk to carry it all in as they make a hasty exit. Now that they've gotten away with petty theft, there's just one more issue to solve: where to put their costumes on. Perhaps a gas station or...
How about the cemetery?
Okay. Upon arriving at the local cemetery, they discover that there's a scroll hidden in the trunk. Since the trunk belonged to Phil's witch-hunting ancestor, that means that the scroll did too. Naturally, Melissa wants to fuck around and read the whole thing. I mean, they've made nothing but great choices so far. Why should I be surprised? While none of them really and truly believe that the scroll's words can do anything, the forces of evil don't give a shit. Shortly after the group leaves, the cemetery becomes a very active place, with residents such as serial killer Vernon Nestor, played by the late Mickey Morton, and Lucinda herself, played by Jonelle Allen, who doesn't look a century over 300 years old. Everybody else looks fucked up though. Also, there is a werewolf and a zombie dwarf. I have no explanation to give you on that. As the horde of ghouls heads into town, nobody really notices that something is amiss, given all the odd characters dressed up and wandering the streets. On his way to Melissa's party, Phil actually meets one of the recently reanimated, by the name of Sandy Matthews, played by Jonna Lee. Meanwhile, Mitch's father, Judge Crandall, played by the late Kevin McCarthy, is visited by Vernon, whom he sentenced to death. Melissa's party is in full swing with much of the student body attending, and some who are just bodies. On a side note, the Cavender house may look somewhat familiar. That's because it's been used in several movies, including Matilda and Scream 2. While Lester, played by Dennis Redfield, is mauled by the werewolf, Lucinda attacks Melissa in the wine cellar, because apparently Lucinda is a vampire witch. Why not? Fuck! I hate to tell you this, Melissa, but you've got bigger problems than a bloodthirsty relative. There's a poltergeist smashing your parents' vintage Merlot. Back up at the party, it seems that Phil is continuing to strike out, while everyone else is pairing up nicely. And I do mean everyone. So, Phil leaves the party and happens to come across Sandy again, who also appears to be having a rough night. He takes her for a drive, during which she encourages him to drag race another car, and go to the malt shop that was replaced by a theater. Afterwards, they go to Lookout Point, where Sandy seems to have some plans for the evening. They're interrupted by Lester, though. Phil and Sandy go to the police, but as I'm sure you can already guess, they don't believe them. As a matter of fact, the police have been receiving very odd reports all night. That means that they'll have to figure this all out themselves. Phil tells Sandy what he and his friends did earlier that evening in the cemetery. Despite what Phil initially thinks, Sandy tells him that the ritual worked. And in order to stop it, they need to get the parchment scroll and seal it with wax made from the bones of Phil's witch-hunting ancestor. Oh, and they have to do this all before midnight. Meanwhile, back at Melissa's party, Melissa has joined the vampiric undead, and even turned Vinny. It's at this point that we get a fourth wall breaking musical number. This would be Get Dead, sung by Sherry Belafonte herself. I'm not gonna lie, it's rather catchy. Naturally, you may be wondering why on earth there would be a dance and music number kind of thrown into this movie. Well, that's because of Michael Jackson's Thriller and how popular it was at the time. As a matter of fact, some of the makeup and special effects crew who worked on Thriller also worked on The Midnight Hour. Phil and Sandy made it to Phil's house and are making silver-tipped bullets in case of another lichen attack.
My dad would be proud, sort of.
A phrase I have also said. Unfortunately for Phil, Dad's home. I'm pretty sure this is what every patient of his sees normally. By now, Phil and Sandy find that the town is, well, dead. That or George A. Romero is visiting. Next stop is Melissa's house, where things have entered the early 40s, apparently. While Sandy grabs some candles for the wax they'll need to make, Phil points out that they still need Nathaniel's ring, which Mitch happens to be wearing. But where is everyone? While running for their lives, Phil manages to grab the ring. I do appreciate that even when faced with his friend being undead and wanting him dead, he still won't dismember him. Off they go away from the house with Vicky to the cemetery. As a foreseeable twist, the substitute teacher did not survive the party, but she's dispatched pretty easily. That doesn't mean that the speed-walking horde headed Phil and Sandy's way will be easily handled, though.
Well, Nate doesn't have any unfinished business around town tonight.
Hey, great-granddad, I need to borrow your femur. Hope you don't mind. Alright, so they finally have Nathaniel's bone dust, wax, the scroll, and his ring. But they forgot the all-important method of actually lighting the candle. Back to the car they go. They create the seal using the matches and all the elements they've gathered. And ta-da! Everything, and I do mean everything, is back to normal like this hellish night never even happened. I will admit, this does raise several questions all at once. Since the curse has obviously been broken, what does that mean for everyone else? I suppose we're led to believe that everyone who was alive beforehand is fine now, but we don't get any confirmation on that. That would be a hell of a way to end things for Phil to return to a fucking empty town. Phil finds Sandy's headstone, realizing that he's essentially been dating a dead girl this whole time. That really sucks. The only blonde he had a chance with, and she's been dead for decades. But Sandy does have one last message for Phil before the night is over. Through the use of call-in radio, the love song she requested plays over Phil's car radio. As Phil drives off with his car top down one more time, the credits roll. And now for the plot. Even though when I watched this movie for the first time, I knew it was an ABC special. For a while, I subconsciously thought it was Disney. But then there were moments that made me go, oh, not Disney. Obviously, the story of the Midnight Hour is loaded with cliches and presents as a little shallow. I do like the town and character history, and it seems like, in a way, there is some interesting lore there. Not every scene or beat throughout makes a whole lot of sense, and the climax doesn't feel quite as fleshed out as it could have been. However, the Halloween goodness of the plot is definitely there. As with any Halloween special that airs on television, it's not meant to be taken too seriously. The key is when the movie itself doesn't take itself too seriously, and the Midnight Hour has fun with its material. That's the key word here. Fun. Ah, the acting of a made-for-television special. It's pretty much what you would expect, if not a little better than some. I wasn't exactly blown away by anyone here, but at the very least I wasn't cringing and laughing my ass off when I wasn't supposed to. I enjoyed Sherry Belafonte and LeVar Burton's performances the most. They knew what kind of movie this was and played into it. I imagine the most fun that they had was after they had been turned. As a matter of fact, everyone seemed to have a good understanding of the tone of this movie. I liked how most of the characters spoke and interacted with each other, even if it wasn't very realistic. With some clear exceptions, pretty much all of the characters were likable, in their own way. Lee Montgomery and Jonna Lee were pleasant to watch, and appeared to have decent chemistry. Lee was able to come across as the semi-uptight nerd who ends up saving the town, and learning a personal lesson. And Jonna did pretty well as a 50s era character, without being annoying and painfully stereotypical. Here's a little fun fact for you. One of those little trick-or-treaters running around is Macaulay Culkin. I feel like there are two categories where the Midnight Hour does pretty well. One of them is the atmosphere and settings of Pitchford. Everything oozes Halloween and autumn vibes, and that's just cranked up when all hell breaks loose after the ritual. It very much embodies a New England town with supernatural elements. Yes, there are stereotypes here, but at least they're enjoyable, even nostalgic. Nothing felt cheap or overly cheesy. The special effects were all practical and looked good, or at least good enough. You can very clearly see the influence of Thriller with the zombies, and ghouls especially, though the whole excessively pale and blue tones that were used fit. During my first viewing, I was kind of surprised with how good the monsters and undead looked. I also appreciate the variety of looks each character had, and how it distinguished them from all the others, as well as the varying degrees of undead that were shown. The second category where I feel this film does nicely is the soundtrack and scoring. Brad Fiedel, whom I'm sure you recognize from Fright Night and Terminator 2, gave us everything we could have asked for from a New England-set Halloween movie. I got strong Halloween Town vibes from the beginning score, while we were touring Pitchford. There was also that genuinely unsettling piece during the scene where Phil and Sandy are cruising through the town, while all the undead residents wandered about. Aside from the score, the soundtrack is wonderfully put together. Even the original song, Get Dead, is good. Like I said, it's catchy and fits with the tone of the movie. Let's take a moment to appreciate the fact that they actually used In the Midnight Hour by Wilson Pickett. Not once, but twice. I remember saying out loud, if they don't use that song at some point, I'm going to riot. So obviously I was quite pleased with this. All the song choices were excellent, and as an added touch that I was not expecting, we even got some song introductions and vocal work from Wolfman Jack. And I know that that alone is nostalgic for a number of people. It's a little touch like that that brings something special to the film. With all that being said, I'm giving The Midnight Hour 7 out of 10 bloody thumbs up. This is a movie that promises mildly spooky Halloween fun, and it delivers on that. It very much feels like the movie itself and everyone involved in it by the end is saying, hey, wasn't that a fun ride? Happy Halloween, guys. It's got its faults, and it's no masterpiece. But if you enjoy nostalgic horror and the Halloween season, you're more than willing to accept that. Now, I am not among the people who grew up having watched this. Even still, once I did watch it, it felt like I had. I didn't hesitate at all to add it to my rotation of annual Halloween viewing, along with all the movies I had grown up with. The Midnight Hour is unfortunately one of those films that was sort of lost to time. Only those who had seen it once or twice as kids knew of its existence, which also means that it can be difficult to get your hands on, but I did. I would recommend The Midnight Hour to Halloween enthusiasts, 80s horror fans, people that enjoy a not-so-scary horror movie every so often, and by some odd segue, Reading Rainbow fans. And if you would like to take an autumn-enveloped trip down memory lane, or watch this for the first time, I have some good news for you. It's available for free right here on YouTube. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like to let me know. Don't forget to leave a comment down below telling me what you think of this movie, whether you grew up with it or not. And if you have any suggestions for horror movies you would like to see me review in the future. You can support the channel through my Patreon, where you would also get exclusive and early access to videos like this. And don't forget to share this video to help the channel grow, and subscribe for more Halloween flavored videos like this. See you later.
Astrachios Mundabor Desmagon. I invoke your powers. Come heed my bidding on this night of nights, the eve of Samhain, All Hallows' Eve.